well, we took the family-friendly tag off. I guess we can say skeet.
Can stream hear me?
I think they can.
Hello.
Oh, someone's in there. Yes, yes.
We do have people.
I'm putting the loading screen on now. Yeah. Just to give us some time. But you know what? The people who tune in early get to hear the background babble before we're actually on camera. So hello, Ba Wilcox.
It's
and we have a resubscribe. Oh my god, it's MRDT Murder Night. Hello, Night. Hello, 34 months. Hot diggity dog.
It's
oh my goodness.
B.A. Wilcox from our Discordy thing.
Oh hey! hello, friend.
But we will have to get you closer acquainted at some point.
Yes. Well, what
Very
better way
soon.
than through a stream?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. YouTube.
Having to do this from your phone isn't the easiest thing in the world, is it, Scrap?
No, it's not, but you know what? I'm being lazy. And it's fine. There. It has been, what do we say? Zeeted?
Tweeted, zeeted, I'm not sure.
It's been tweeted. It's been...
It has
I
been
was gonna say
posted
Twitter
on the thing that was once Twitter.
The artist formerly known as... Hold on, I gotta skeet it too.
I think...
With 43 seconds to go. We're good.
Twitter built a whole language around an app. Like, how does this transfer over? I'm not sure.
It's like how people still use the term Xerox sometimes.
Yeah.
I have one invite code. What?
What?
I have an invite code now. It's only taken like 2 weeks. Where's my post? There we go. There we go. Posting. Good. You know, I should probably look and see what we look like on YouTube too. Oh my goodness, and here we are! Hello, scribblers! It has been so long because life gets a little bit crazy sometimes. Hello, everyone! How are you? Oh,
I'm streaming the
some
chat
feedback from myself here a little bit. That's okay. Hello, everyone. Pat was literally thinking artist formerly known as. Welcome back to a long overdue, much missed Chill Creation stream. And I am joined by a very, very good friend and a very fantastic writer, editor, creator. Riley. It be Riley. Riley, would you like to introduce yourself?
I be Riley. I am a human being that does the things that includes sensitivity reading.
Many wonderful things.
I am aware of many hats. One of which is the sensitivity reading stuff that I believe we're going to be talking about today.
We are
And
indeed.
I also do normal editing and stuff like that, and I do consulting on mythology and history and just general disability, LGBTQ, and mental health consulting. Yes, I wear many hats.
You do it all.
I do
You
it
truly, truly do. And we are going to do a deep dive tonight because, well, we have some announcements, but we're going to save those for the end and do like a nice big reveal. But as you know...
Waiting for the message.
Soon, very soon. So, as you know, if you've been hanging out here with me on the channel for a while, over the past however many years we've been doing this on and off, we like to use our chill creation streams not just for content creation and TTRPG game design, but to do deep dives into specific aspects of creation, whether that's world building, whether that is all ages accessibility, and tonight is sensitivity reading. So this topic gets a lot of attention, usually when something goes wrong or when a project is identified that probably could use sensitivity reading. We are not going to name names. We are not getting into that. We are just going to have a conversation about sensitivity reading and editing. What is it? What makes it different from other kinds of editing? And why it's important, whether you are designing a TTRPG, writing a book, making a podcast, doing any sort of creative content. If your work features sentient beings of any kind, because this came up on a previous interview I've had about this. Hey, pups! Goodness. Apparently my dog's trying to chew my desk. That's good. If it contains sentient beings of any kind, if there's any sort of parallel to humans or humanity or society, you're gonna need some sort of sensitivity rating.
Even if it's not a huge amount, you need
Even
to
if
have
it's not a
some
huge
kind
amount.
of input.
Yes. So, as we go through this stream tonight, we are going to debunk some myths. We're going to talk about some commonly held perceptions or misconceptions about what this field is. I know, I see that eye roll. Some of them are just quite painful and frustrating, but
I think
we as a community can also do better at educating.
Yes.
And doing that outreach and sharing the behind the scenes. So that's what we want to do tonight. So if at any point during the stream anyone in the chat has questions or comments or things they would like to share, I want to know what you've heard about sensitivity readers. Good, bad, ugly. Just keep it clean. I did take the family friendly tag off, but let's still be respectful in the chat, y'all. Most of you already know that already. So let's begin by just defining what is sensitivity reading, Riley. I'm gonna call on you. Class, take note.
That's a much harder question to answer.
That's not a fair one to start with. How do
people...
you approach sensitivity reading as a sensitivity reader and editor yourself? How would you describe it?
For me, it's about allowing people to create stories that touch on that can touch on taboo and touchy subjects without necessarily exasperating the people who have trauma through those experiences. And although in some cases it's not always going to be possible to 100% make that disconnect, we can at least do what we can to lessen the impact and use things like content warnings and things to go, okay, this is a thing that is touched on here. There's only so much we can do to help. We're not always going to fix everything, but we can do what we can to help lessen the impact it has on some of its potential audience.
Yes. And that can be a tricky thing as well. So looking at your intended audience versus the audience that you know your content will reach inevitably. And it's not sometimes one of the misconceptions, right? We'll start with this as we talk about it. One of the misconceptions is that sensitivity readers are or editors are hired on to ensure that no one's feelings get hurt. That's a very simplified way of saying it, and it's not entirely accurate.
Yeah. But it's just minimizing that when that's not possible. Like, there are some people, we had this conversation yesterday, some people are gonna get offended by things no matter what you do. Some people are gonna be upset by things no matter what you do. I think the way I phrased it was, some people are gonna get butthurt for the sake of getting butthurt over something. And you're not always going to be able to please everyone.
Nope.
But you can do what you can to lessen the impact for those that you know it's going to affect.
And it depends on the content you have as well. So let's go down the list here, because we put some notes together for specific topics that we did want to
amazingly highlight. Prepared for this stream.
We did
I'm proud of us.
Get prepared for this stream. I know we're gonna go off the handle. I know we're gonna go all over the place and bounce around, but we want to talk about what is it, what does it include, some tips for creators if you're looking to hire a sensitivity reader, and some tips for sensitivity readers themselves, tips for our own community, whether this is something you've done for years and or you have a good repertoire of projects under your belt that you've worked on, or if you're just getting started and you want to learn more. So sensitivity reading at the start, we're not fun vampires. It's not a grift. It is an actual skill set. It is an actual service that can be and is professionalized in many ways. Sensitivity readers can support publications, projects, organizations, multimedia, any sort of creative content that you're trying to put out there. And there is a vast range of different backgrounds within sensitivity readers. So I think one of the big misconceptions out there when you hire a sensitivity reader is that they can do it all. Right? So if you think about all of the different categories of topics, of themes that could be present in a game, I've got a whole list here, and we can probably add to it. You're talking about mental health. You're talking about race and ethnicity. Your neurodivergence of various flavors and genres. You're talking about disability representation and varying degrees of abledness, economic disparity, cultural norms, politics, languages, trauma,
rights and discrimination,
all sorts of things. Human rights, yes, and different forms of discrimination. And when it comes to TTRPGs and the fictional landscape, you're going to run into content. Sensitivity readers are not trying to tell you not to talk about these different things. If you're going to approach these topics, that's fine. But what we aim to do is to help you better understand the topics that you are exploring and presenting from different perspectives. So you try to look at an intersectional approach for these things as well. Because even if, say, you have someone who you have a neurodivergent creator, most of us are. Maybe
most creators in general are.
Most creators are. And you have different states, you have different levels of experience with that. Even if you have that kind of experience firsthand, while that does make you a little bit better situated due to your direct experience and your own personal understanding to write about certain topics, you still have blind spots. We all still have blind spots. Sensitivity readers still have blind spots. So it's important to be able to identify that. And when you want to bring sensitivity editing into your project, to really try to categorize, and characterize is a better word, what are those themes that you want to convey? I'm going to pause there for a second because I'm not even able to put comments in my own chat. I've got to log in. How silly is that?
You're having to follow your own rules, Script.
Oh my goodness. Dear. What are these rules for? Everyone else but me, clearly. We're not supposed to follow our own rules. I wanted to be able to see who is in here. Almost 3 years? Yes! T.
We have an Effie as well.
Nice to meet you.
One of my oldest internet friends.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I've known Effie for nearly 10 years.
Aw, nice to
Really
meet
scary.
you, Effie. And nice to meet you, Wilcox, as well again. Always good to see you, Knight. Almost 3 years. Hot damn. It has been, yeah, 36 months. Oh boy, thanks for sticking along for the ride. Yeah, so for those of you joining in, if you have any questions or comments about sensitivity readers, hop in.
Effie, behave yourself.
That's a caveat.
No, we were talking about this earlier. He was like, I'm just gonna come in and troll you. I was like, behave yourself.
Nice.
So yeah, Effie, play nice.
So, did I miss? Would you like to add to that initial comment? Let's do some discussion here when it comes to the myriad of different areas that you could be involved in as a sensitivity editor.
I think you covered a lot of them. I mean,
I did go on a ramble, didn't I?
I think bearing in mind what your own background is, I think you missed off cultural.
Nah. What? Cultural norms. Yes. Yeah. So let's talk about that, because we didn't really go into our respective backgrounds too much. It might help our chat, our audience here, to know where we're coming from.
I mean, I am very clearly a femme-presenting white Brit. I come from, in that respect, a fairly privileged background, but it was an extremely level.
I meant as a sensitivity reader and creator.
Okay, but this is important because lived experience is important, and that informs a heck of a lot of what I do. Like, so my background growing up is like very much just beneath the breadline for the vast majority of my life at this point. Informs so much of what I do as a sensitivity reader. And my lived experience as a disabled person, my lived experience as a neurodivergent person, my lived experience as a gender non-conforming person who is wildly on the LGBTQ or under the LGBTQ umbrella in several different colors.
All beautiful colors.
Yes, I am a lot of the rainbow, but that is all part of what I do and sharing that lived experience. But just because I have it from my lived experience doesn't mean I talk for everyone who also falls under those categories as a sensitivity reader, because it changes depending on the position. As I said, the position and place you're in as a child growing up, your own experiences through life, your own traumas and trauma responses. Everything that we do is very much directed and built around how we live our own lives and the experiences that we've had. And lived experience is an extremely important thing. Secondary experience, also important, though not quite as important, I would say, to an extent. But yeah, there is. So that is what I do as a sensitivity reader. I cover those aspects, especially the disability and the mental health and the LGBTQ rights side of things. I also work as what I call a general sensitivity reader. So I will come in, I will point out the big, glaringly obvious mistakes on any front that we know that are simple mistakes that just have slipped through these people's blind spots, because it's their babies. They are always going to have blind spots no matter how hard they've worked on this project. And then I could point out areas that might need consultants with other lived experience. One project we've worked on was Inspirals with Hatchman Games, and I'm not deaf. I don't know sign language, so there was also a sign language and deaf consultant within the team.
Yes.
Like, you can't just have a sensitivity reader. I was the general sensitivity reader, but the vast majority of the actual content from that point of view, which was the base of the game, was someone else, because I don't have that experience to be able to consult on. Even like vaguely as in a secondary capacity, I just don't have that experience, and I'm never gonna claim that I do. And I wouldn't want to.
And I think that's an important distinction as well. There are a few things in what you just shared that I would like to draw some attention to. One, someone caught on to it in the chat, Epi, so you need a sensitivity team. Sometimes you do.
Yeah.
Sometimes you absolutely do. Because there were two things in there that I think are good takeaways. General sensitivity reading, and then specific.
Yeah.
So we use the terms general and specific when it comes to other types of analysis as well. So for example, my professional background is as a cultural psychologist. And I've performed that duty within that field in a variety of different ways. Yeah, you saw the puppy back there. One of two. I'm a proud dog mom. But we talk about culture general and culture specific. And I think that same sort of dichotomy can be used in sensitivity reading analysis as well, where you're looking at something as a whole. You're looking at the project in its primary presentation, the overarching themes, how information is presented, what kind of themes are present, and then you can dial down really so far. You
deep as you want to and have the ability to go.
As you have the ability to go. So when it comes to being a professional sensitivity reader, that ability to reflect upon your own lived experiences, your own primary and secondary and tertiary experiences is very, very important. And it helps to build credibility. It helps to build service provider and client trust as well, when you can be honest and sincere about. So for me, I can talk about different cultural representation. I am a Filipino American. I can talk about immigrant family experience. I can talk about what it's like to be a person of color. I can talk about racial discrimination, ethnic discrimination, because those are two different things. Yeah. I can talk about mental health, because I do have background study academically and with personal experience with various forms of trauma and anxiety and depression and abuse, and those very sensitive types of terms.
Yeah.
Also, I will say very quickly, probably should have done a content warning. So this is a stream about sensitivity reading, right? So if at any point anyone in the chat feels uncomfortable, do not feel like you have to stay. If you want to send a whisper, I think they call it, on Twitch, we might be going into some, or at least referencing some sensitive themes. We are not going to dive into anything in great detail. We're not going to come up with graphic descriptions, but I do just want to say that.
There are themes that are going to be touched on
that
might not be suitable for everyone.
Right, and that is why we took the family-friendly tag off. I typically have that on, but tonight I wanted to be able to have a more open and honest conversation. So, yes, being able to be self-reflective, understand where your limitations are, and also examine your own internalized biases. I think we can probably talk about that a little bit more, but before I do, I want to highlight a question in the chat from Gray4. Hello, Gray4. Great for. What would be a common topic you find yourselves providing sensitivity reading to or for? Ooh. So let's talk about TTRPGs. Would you like to go first?
I think the biggest thing for pretty much all the projects I've done so far have been, they're very much child friendly or directly aimed at kids.
Oh, yeah.
Because I've done both. So that in itself is a whole topic of how do we approach this? This is generally a very adult game. Like tabletop role-playing games in general are a very adult hobby. Generally because they get very expensive. And you can't afford to when you're not. But how do we make this adult game in general suitable for children? Whether that's creating a new child-friendly system or a system that a child can easily pick up, or whether that's hacks for more well-known tabletop role-playing games that we all frequent. It's the how do we make this kid-friendly is one of the biggest things that I've had to deal with as a sensitivity reader at this point. My consultancy-wise, it's slightly different because that's mostly been sensitivity with mythology mixed in.
I'd like to hear more about that, because whenever we talk about mythology and folklore, there are some very problematic things in a lot of the myths that we all know and love. Think about all the demigods in Greek mythology, Greco-Roman mythology. Just first and foremost, Zeus was very, very problematic. Very.
And I have spent, going on to the mythology, I've spent years studying ancient Greek culture and Greek mythology and Greek history and the psychology behind it all and the philosophy behind, like, that's what I've dedicated my entire life to, and I don't want to show the tattoo on my arm because in modern day context it really doesn't look good. Do you know what? I'm proud of it.
Do it.
It's the Molon Lab, it's the Spartan.
Which
Which has obviously been co-opted by... I don't know how...
Some undesirable groups.
Yes.
We can say. But you know what? I'm going to make a note of that because we should come back to that as a talking point.
Yeah.
When it comes to symbols and themes that are very exciting, very interesting to explore, but how do you handle it from a sensitivity reader point of view if things are co-opted?
With great difficulty when you have one on your arm.
It's not impossible, but it does require more caution, I would say.
Oh god, yeah. And I will mention, I've been called out for it before. Being a sensitivity reader with such a now annoyingly widely recognized series of symbols and words on your arm that is connected to people that I'm just neo-Nazi fascists and gun nuts, and having that on my arm.
Let's talk about this though.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it, because it's not just the iconography of Spartans, right? Think about another type of creative community, I guess, or not community, but theme, trend, we can say trend, that a lot of people are really into. Vikings.
That was unfortunately the other one.
And that is very difficult because on one hand, very, very interesting and rich historical records and culture and spirituality and belief systems and all of those different things. But I think when it comes to this topic, we won't save it for later. We're going to jump in right here because this is what happens on this stream. We follow
very
the
much
threads.
End up being a history stream at this point.
That's okay. That's okay, because a big excuse or attempt at justifying problematic themes in creative content is that people will say, but it's historically accurate. And that's a fallacy. That is absolutely a fallacy, because one, it's not always.
When it comes to the Viking ideal and the what is called the Spartan mirage of, do you know what, as much as they are one of my, like, from an academic point of view, being in love with all things ancient Greece, from its history and archaeology through to its mythology and current day issues and culture, and just Greece in general, I love studying the era of, or the area of Sparta for all of what we know is Spartan culture. That's why I've got the tattoo.
There's nothing wrong with that, though. So we shouldn't have to be apologetic for it.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I was gonna say, but it's the Spartan mirage is very much not that. It's what the film presents, the film 300, or the comic that the film was based on. has created this whole perfect ideal and put Spartans as the face of it. The history isn't there to support that. Like, it's just with a lot of what they say as like it's historically accurate. Well, no, in that case, it's actually not. You're following the modern ideals of not
the reinterpretation of it and the exploitation, I would say.
And
so
the same
you
with
hinged
Vikings.
upon something exactly. You hinged upon something very important there. So when it comes to diving into mythology or different types of things, so a lot of TTRPGs are based in fantasy, right?
Yeah.
So you look at the Dark Ages, you look at past historical fiction, right? And a lot of times you have cases where it's not historically accurate. It's not representative of the actual documentation, the actual research behind these different things, whether it's Spartans, whether that's Vikings, whether that's paganism, whether that is representation of
Druidic cultures.
people of color as well, and Druidic cultures. So another example, Vikings were very diverse. They weren't all Scandinavian looking.
Viking was a job title.
And Viking was a job title.
Yeah,
exactly.
Viking was a job title, and they did more trading and I don't want to say globalization, but they built countries.
They did.
They did
Expansion.
try to globalize, but Viking was a job title, not a whole group of people. The Vikings were the people that went out and raided, but they traded, they settled, and especially within the UK, like what was the Daneland ended up crumbling because they all married and like were intermingled within the community. They the word is not brain is not working today, but
That's okay.
they weren't just raping, pillaging, and stealing everything. There is so much more to that culture.
There was much more to that.
Just isn't looked at.
And
the
I
whole,
think
it's historically accurate thing.
it's a fallacy.
It's generally bullshit.
And I think that this conversation, so we're going into a little bit of a tangent with mythology and folklore, but this shows another aspect of what it takes to be a professional sensitivity reader. And whether you are a creator looking for a sensitivity reader for hire, or if you are someone who wants to navigate this field professionally. And when I say professionally, I don't mean you have to be doing it for years. I don't mean you have to have a degree in it, although different types of academic backgrounds can help. As you've seen from this conversation so far, you pull from primary, secondary, tertiary experiences. We'll just say academic study. Areas of chosen academic study, whether you have a degree or not. Degrees are not a requirement for this, but what is a requirement, and what anyone hiring a sensitivity reader could look out for, is maintaining currency. So when it comes to the different themes, when it comes to the different focus areas for sensitivity reading, mythology and folklore, historical representation, rewind if you're watching the VOD back to that whole laundry list of things I mentioned. One of the most critical parts of being an effective sensitivity reader is staying on top of your research. Make sure you stay aware of the trends, of the new studies, of the different ways in which these different topics are presented. Because if you are trying to work as a sensitivity reader, but you are staying within your echo chamber, and it's comfortable. I like my echo chamber. It's safe. It's full of people who I enjoy, and it's saying all these wonderful, affirming things. But treat this as any other form of professional analysis and consultation. You need to have a broader understanding, even if you're specializing, a broader understanding of the spread of the different interpretations of, say, Viking culture or racial representation, mental health, all of those different things. So one example I can give, just talking about things like ADHD, talking about depression, talking about maladaptive behaviors. Once upon a time, that was just all written off as crazy. Women were given different types of surgeries because they were having hysterics, right? Yeah, your ovaries removed. Content warning. But the understanding, the scientific and the medical understanding of mental health issues has grown vastly, even just in the past decade.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about common topics, one of the topics that I'm often asked to read or edit for a review, whether it's from a story narrative standpoint or a game design standpoint, is mental health. Mental health and cultural representation, particularly when it comes to non-white cultures. So those are different areas that I have been asked to take a look at, whether they are fantastical representations of different races or actual more based in reality representations of different races and ethnicities. And I would not be nearly as effective with that if I didn't stay on top of my research. So it takes a little bit of work. I don't mean to make it sound daunting, but it does help you become more effective. And again, it builds that credibility and that trust. So I think we had another comment in there from Wilcox. I would guess a new child system versus making a current system child safe. Yeah, I can't imagine the current systems are meant to be child friendly. So that's an interesting thing. So when we talk about all of these different themes, go ahead.
It's doable.
It is doable.
It has been done. There are D&D hacks for kids.
I got my start writing those.
My big brother has just started running a one-on-one campaign for my niece. She's 11. But my other niece is 5 and 6 and also wanting to get into it. And there are hacks out there that have made it a child-friendly game. It's not easy, but it is doable.
It's about breaking it down as well. So what are the elements of whatever the system is that make it less accessible for younger players or even new players, even people who are brand new to TTRPGs? So is it a content aspect in terms of the setting? And one of the things that I've been asked a lot over the years, because my specialty is all ages game design, right? As a creator versus an editor. But you want to look at, what was I saying for content? One of the biggest questions is, well, how do you talk about violence? You can still talk about violence. You can still have some of these more difficult themes. It's about the way you present them. Or if you present a character in the world, whether there's an NPC or a big bad, whatever they may be, and they exhibit, unacceptable behaviors, you want to ensure that it's represented in a way where you communicate that these things are wrong. And this is not how things should be. This is a negative kind of thing.
Things.
Don't glorify it. You want to be very careful. Oh, here we go. There's a follow-on. The big thing is separating lore, stories, etc. from the systems themselves. Yes, absolutely. But some systems are inherently connected to the setting as well. And you want to think about that because a lot of times we'll talk about D&D Pathfinder, pick your picture, pick your system. Vampire the Masquerade, right? You have mechanics within the system that are integral, with the setting itself. So you want to kind of figure out where those different aspects are and find those points within that system, whether it's setting based or mechanics based, that are a little bit more difficult.
There are other case studies you can pull from. You've got the Grimm fairy tales are not child-friendly stories.
Yeah, that's going back to another comment from Graveyard.
Yeah, they have, or the big company in the sky, Mouses, has managed to make those
more palatable,
accessible to children.
Yeah.
If it can be done with some, some of those fairy tales, don't get me wrong, they're the versions I grew up with on, and I love them, but they're horrific. And I know we've taken the child-friendly tag off, but I really don't want to go into it, but some of them really are.
We don't have to go into detail.
Cinderella is...
There's some body horror.
Yeah.
We can leave it at that.
Yeah. So many of these stories have been... They found the key elements of the story and then changed everything else to make it palatable for children. And you can still do that with things like D&D lore, where there is a heck of a lot of really awful stuff in D&D lore. Just taking Forgotten Realms as an example, there's some awful stuff in there.
And most of it's borrowed from different forms of mythology and folklore anyway. It's not really original. They
literally have the Olympian gods listed as usable gods in the PHP. Like,
beg, borrow, and steal.
Yeah. There are ways of doing it. And you just have to be able to identify not necessarily the key elements where it links with the gameplay, but the key elements of the story itself. And what makes this story, and what else is, as a writer's term, fluff. Right. How much of this is just padding it out to fit the genre and to fit the audience? What are the key elements of this?
Genre and audience. So when it comes to adapting something to make it more accessible, make it more all ages friendly, or remove some problematic elements of it, looking at the core goal. So this is going into a little bit of a design standpoint as well. What is your intent with your creative content? Are you trying to use metaphor, allegory, whatever, to deliver a certain kind of message, to communicate a certain kind of theme or a lesson? Do you want to encourage a certain style of gameplay? So when you go a few layers deeper into sensitivity reading and you look at it from not even just a story and narrative standpoint, but you go into that design and how things are portrayed, you want to think about the actual design goals. So this is more a conversation that would need to happen. So if we go back to those tips for creators and sensitivity readers themselves, this is a conversation that you need to have together. So as a creator, have your design goals in mind. Have your design goals in mind. If you want to use different elements from mythology or different types of subject matter that would require sensitivity reading and editing, think about how you're going to use those themes in support of your ultimate goal. Cut out the fluff, right? You don't need it as much. If the different elements you're wanting to incorporate don't support the primary goal of either desired style of gameplay, certain type of message, whatever you're trying to communicate to your audience, to your players or readers, if it doesn't fit that, it's going to distract. And it's going to create a little bit more of a tangled kind of product, both narratively and in terms of the design. But then as a sensitivity editor, have that conversation. If someone is hiring you onto a project, what is your goal with this project? What is your intent behind using some of these themes? You had something, Riley.
And I think from this whole standpoint is get your sensitivity readers involved as early in the process.
Early and often. Don't wait till it's done, people.
For a start, if you wait till it's done, you're just gonna get your feelings hurt. Because there will be things, no matter how careful you've tried to be, there are going to be things that you just didn't see because you've spent the last 2 years working on this project and you have your blinders on. I've been there with my work. I know I've had this conversation with you, Scriv.
Oh yeah.
Going through the process with you at the moment. You have done so much to make sure everything's covered, but there was still those slight blind spots that you just hadn't considered. And that if you wait until the very end of a project to have those big glaring issues pointed out, not that there were any big glaring issues with you because we did it the right way, but it will prevent those issues ever becoming a thing in the first place. And you can build around having that sensitivity from day one, not having to go back and fix everything retrospectively.
Exactly. And Gray 4, I agree with you. And this is part of why we want to really emphasize this point. The worst thing would be completing it all and then having to rip a huge chunk out of it. And this is where you get some of the misconceptions, some of the more hurtful thoughts of we are fun vampires and we're taking the awesome out of a story. No, no. Bring us in early. Bring us in often. Because that way, so I would agree, right? If I'm at the end of a project, this is my creation. I'm bringing it to life. I don't want someone to then attack it. That's terrifying. But at the same time, if I had included sensitivity editors in from the beginning, it's so much easier. And I promise you the product will be that much better by the end. It will be a much more polished and effective product in conveying whatever kind of message it is that you want to communicate. So if there is only one takeaway from this, include your sensitivity readers early and often. If you're worried about budget, so that's another thing. When you're hiring on sensitivity readers, do not ask them to go pro bono, right? If someone offers, then that's one thing, and that's out of the goodness of their hearts. But sensitivity readers and editors are still editors. So you still want to ensure that you compensate them appropriately.
As someone who does both, it takes just as much time to sensitivity edit something as it does to actually edit something. Mm-hmm. I say actually edit, traditionally edit something.
Line editing.
Line editing, copy editing, and even more so developmental editing. That, if anything, takes so much more time.
Accessibility editing. Shout out to another one of my editing team from Bard, Chris Hops, in the chat. What?
And I think this is something that someone mentioned earlier about getting a sensitivity team together. Because our editing team included a sensitivity team, and I'm gonna be honest, it was nice just having to do the sensitivity side of things for once rather than doing both. It made my job a heck of a lot easier because I didn't then have to go do both. But having that team there gives you so many different points of view and different perspectives to see things from.
Absolutely. It alleviates stress.
The better.
It helps to share the load of working on a project. Oh, thank you, Hops. Thank you. It's very, very helpful because, again, no editor is one size fits all. And a content editor is not necessarily a sensitivity editor, and vice versa. That's also not necessarily the case. Now,
I am aware of many hats. Not everyone wears as many hats as I do.
You're a special case.
I need to take some hats off at some point, I think. But no, I like the hats I'm wearing at the moment.
So
it's got to be involved in some
I think burnout will be a whole nother conversation that we need to have on the stream.
But and recovering from creative burnout and burnout as the difference between creative burnout and burnout as a creator as well is a huge one.
Stick a pin in that. I want to save that, but I don't want to get off topic. That's a really good one. Okay, so other things, because we were covering a lot of the points that I'd wanted to discuss tonight, but I want to go down a little bit of that structured list. So taking all of that, if we had some tips for creators, hire sensitivity readers and editors with backgrounds that are relevant to the product you are creating. If you're pulling from mythology, find someone who has some experience studying mythology. If you are representing different mental health aspects and different races and different cultures, bring those types of things too. Economic disparity. Look for people who are comfortable and familiar with that kind of representation. Because what you don't want is to really lean into the bias, So, okay. as another tip for both creators and sensitivity readers, examine your own internalized biases. We are talking about blind spots quite a bit. Everyone has blind spots. I'll be open and honest about one myself. Even though I come from an immigrant family background, I was born in the US. I did not myself directly experience the process of immigration and what that meant. By the time I was born, and my father was born in the US as well, we had already been more or less established. I have secondary experience with it from the stories and seeing the impact and the long-lasting impact of certain things with discrimination and moving to a new country, completely uprooting, that it had on my family. So I can speak about it from that aspect. I can speak about it from the generational aspect. But one of my blind spots is the actual act of immigration itself from a personal, direct standpoint. So that is something that you always need to be very aware and very honest about as well. And from a creator standpoint, acknowledging those internalized biases. Even if you are a member of a certain type of community or perspective that you are writing about, does help. So when it comes to things like cultural norms, for example, we all have different cultural norms. We all have different ideas of worldview and where we fit into the world. If you are writing from the perspective of a certain type of voice, if I wanted to write a story about an immigrant family, I need to acknowledge the fact that even though I have some of that experience, I can't talk about everything, and there might be certain things that I misrepresent. So from a creator standpoint, don't be ashamed of it. Don't be embarrassed about it. It's not about whatever ego or pride or street cred, right? It's about representing an honest and sincere piece of work. Because if you make things up, or if you represent things in a way that maybe is not representative of a larger community as a whole, there are going to be some issues. And once it's out there, you can't take it back as easily. Yes, we've all seen public apologies of people who are going to try to do better, but unfortunately, to some degree, the damage is done. And you can work past it. There are ways to work past it, but it's going to be difficult, especially if you have the opportunity to work with sensitivity readers from the beginning. We are out there. Just about any topic you'd want to talk about. You can find, no, we're not quiet about it. So, in addition, another tip, when you're hiring a sensitivity reader, listen to them. Listen to them.
There have been
go ahead.
So many publications out there from many different publishers.
Let's not name names.
Not naming names. Who have actively hired writers. Actively hired writers within a certain cultural background because of that cultural background from a sensitivity
we call it box checking and performative business.
And then completely altered their writing to the point where the author is no longer happy with it and still putting their name to it. They've done the same with hiring editors, sensitivity readers on board at various companies, and it's not just the one we haven't mentioned. It's so many have done this, and they've taken on this sensitivity reader, even at the perfect opportunity right at the start. But then it gets to the end product, they've printed that sensitivity reader's name in the book, but have failed to take on any of the advice given, and they've failed to implement any of the changes recommended, but they're still printing the names to that sensitivity reader's work and claiming it to be their work, when at that point, it's not. If you're gonna hire them, if you choose not to use their input, that's fine. Just don't credit them for it, because
that hurts everyone involved, because it makes you look foolish, and it really, really damages the credibility, or at least initial perceived credibility of that reader as well. And it harms the field. It harms the community. at the end of the day, because there are going to be people who are hurt by the misrepresentation of the themes. You're screwing up your own credibility as a creator, and then you are burning a bridge with the sensitivity editor. They've done that enough. Sorry, there was something stuck in my throat there. Oops. Okay, so hire and listen, include early and often, and examine your own internalized biases. Now, we had a whole list of tips for sensitivity readers and editors themselves for our community, right? So, being a sensitivity reader, it can be a very challenging job. It can also be a very rewarding job. And there are ways to turn it into more of a profession and take it seriously. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to say it's more than a hobby, because a lot of times we do all of this part-time. We do this because we're passionate about it, and you need some of that passion, a lot of that passion as a sensitivity reader. You want to be a good advocate and a good representative for that field. And I'm going to say this right up front. It was lower down on our list, but I'm just going to say it. You want to exercise objectivity, and there is a fine line between using your personal and lived experiences and being an advocate and using that research and all that good knowledge and perspective that you've developed. But you want to be very, very careful that you are not just using your role as a platform for social activism. I'm going to get this one out of the way right away, because this is a little bit controversial. Maybe call it a hot take. Right? Hot takes.
There's many things going on, especially within the indie tabletop community at the moment, that have ruffled feathers,
yes.
To put it as nicely as possible. But you can't use your platform and clout as a sensitivity reader to go on the white savior Barbie rant.
I loved that line in the movie. I loved it. It was so good. We'll talk about that later. We'll talk about that later.
We're also going to have later.
Yes, it is.
But you can't use that experience. You can't use that following, whatever the brand that you're building, as a way to dunk on creators that miss the mark. But you can very much call them out for the mistakes that were made and the project itself, but calling for boycotts and things crosses a line. And that's not something we as sensitivity readers want to do. If you want to go all social justice warrior,
I even don't like using that term anymore.
Yeah,
I don't like using that phrase. If you want
to go and actively...
If you want to be an activist and a campaigner, you know, and that's good. That's good. Do that. Do that. That's not to say that if you're a sensitivity reader, you can't do those things. However,
you have to draw the line.
You still have to draw the line somewhere. And there's a difference between being a sensitivity reader to ensure different types of themes and communities are represented faithfully. And sometimes people on the other side of the fence will see that as being woke and being a social activist, and that's not the case. That's not. So sometimes those lines can be blurred. On the other hand, if you are presenting yourself as a sensitivity reader for specific types of representation, but then you go off the rails a little bit and start to include other things in there as well that is beyond the scope of what you've been doing, that can damage the reputation a little bit. You could still be one of the most informed and knowledgeable people about that topic, whatever it may be. But you want to be very clear about the scope of the project as well, and what the intent of the project is. Still advocate. Be a loud and proud and powerful advocate. Just time and place, right? Yeah. And you have to exercise your best judgment, exercise objectivity, and approach your work with integrity. So I think we can go on to the rest of that list, but did you have something else?
I was just going to say, you can go through a project and point out where things could have been done differently.
Yes.
you can very much bring the fact that they weren't done differently to light. We're not, and there's nothing stopping you from doing that. But there's a difference between doing that as a sensitivity reader and wanting to bring light to something that could have been done better if someone was within your role had been included. And then there's the other side of it is you're doing it just to go on this advocate side of things. Like, there is a difference between advocating for the role and advocating for the thing that's going on.
And again, I don't want to say that you can't do that, but just be careful of where you draw that line as a sensitivity reader, because that takes it from being. It does. You have to draw that line somewhere, and that helps to evolve it into a more professional service that you are providing. So with all of that, you're looking at being a good advocate for the field, building up your network as well, because if you are going to approach the work with integrity, understand your own blind spots and biases, understand when maybe someone you do need to bring in a sensitivity team. If you build up your network, then you can reach out to people. Then you can have those trusted colleagues, those trusted partners, and bring them into a project. Because again, and this is another tip, no editor is one size fits all. This is for both creators and sensitivity readers. Yeah. We want to be able to do it all because there's a hustle mindset. There is. And I'm not going to deny it, and I'm not going to argue it.
We need to make money because otherwise we can't pay for food and
because
bills
we can't
and
pay
things.
for our
like
bills.
There is like I kind of need this, or I can't afford to live this month. Like, there is always going to be that side of it, but this doesn't make it a grift.
It's not a grift, and it should never be perceived as such either. Okay, other aspects, intersectional considerations. We've touched upon that before. It's connected to our internalized blind spots and biases. When you talk about the lived experiences of a certain group of people, understand that there are people within that group where those who will still have differing experiences for things.
Subcultures are a thing.
Subcultures are absolutely a thing. Set clear boundaries and parameters for your work. If you are being hired on as a sensitivity editor, do not let them encourage or pressure you into doing extra work outside of the boundaries for that. You are not, if you are a sensitivity editor, you are not also a layout designer or a content and line editor, right? You're not fixing people's grammar as much, and sometimes it's really hard not to go into that if you wear those multiple hats, right? But you have to set clear boundaries and parameters for your work, because that will benefit both you and the creator, the project owner. And finally, because we've been bouncing around quite a bit, I want to emphasize this one again as well. As you are exercising objectivity, also ensure you are keeping on top of your research, staying current, and maintaining relevancy for the different topics. Certain types of words, certain phrases that are used in reference to mental health states and conditions are no longer appropriate. Right? So I don't think I need to name them here, but there are different types of studies. You don't need money for it. You can just Google it. But exercise good research methods. Is your friend. Google is your friend. Sensibly. Wiki is not as bad as it used to be.
There are whole teams of people out there making Wiki better.
There are. Talk about people who could use some donations. Donate to Wiki, man. Keep that going. But look more than just surface level for certain things. And when you are doing your research, always just exercise your good methods, your good methodology. Where is it coming from? Who's saying it? What kind of agenda do they have? That's a whole nother thing. Cross-check your sources. Yes, Grey 4. Yes. Cross-check your sources. And ensure...
And our academic is happy.
And ensure that you are looking beyond your own personal echo chamber as well. Because you have your intended audience for a project, and a creative work. And then you have the broader audience. And as Riley mentioned before, sometimes people like to be butthurt just for the sake of having something to be angry about. But also, you're going to have people who are legitimately interested in the product and the work that you're doing, and they might catch something. The readers will always catch things that you missed.
And
always.
I want to say there's nothing wrong with that. There is always room for improvement, but
Yes.
no matter how big your team is, and we can talk about teams being too big being an issue in itself, but no matter how perfect a team you put together for something, chances are something somewhere is going to slip the net.
Nothing's perfect.
And
because you can't please everyone, and you're not going to be able to read everyone's minds. But what you can do is ensure that the themes that you are mindfully and deliberately including are represented in the best possible way. So, are there any more questions in the chat? We've had some good comments and some good queries in there.
While we're waiting for these to come through, I'm going to throw it out there. Mr. Wilcox, if you're looking for a sensitivity reader, I am looking for work. So
I can vouch for them. I'll write a good recommendation letter.
But yeah, it's the whole conversation. I was asked the other day on what was once known as Twitter, what the most common thing with being a consultant for mental health issues was that I see, not necessarily just in things that I've worked on, but literature as a whole.
Yes.
And
yes,
that was a heck of a lot more difficult a question than I thought it would be to actually answer, because it completely depends on what kind of setting you're working within. If you're doing a slice of life, real world story that is going to focus on mental health issues, there are certain things you can't gloss over. Whereas if you're in a fantasy setting where mental health is dealt with in a completely different way to how we would deal with it here, there are more things you can gloss over and not necessarily dive as deep into, because it's your world and you can approach it to an extent however the hell you can, however the hell you want. But so it completely depends what the project is, and it all comes back round to who's your intended audience, what are your goals. And you can't just go, I am a mental health consultant, and then because of your lived experience not be able to put those things aside and go, okay, we have to approach this one differently because this isn't a real world scenario. Yes, there are effects, and this is possibly going to trigger people from real life traumas they've had, but we need to be able to separate ourselves from our own biases and trauma and experience to be able to have that objectivity in a world that's not necessarily directly reflective of our own. And it's such a difficult thing to try to explain to someone, especially in a tweet.
It doesn't work as well.
So I'm hoping they're in chat, lingering somewhere, because they did say they would pop in. But yeah, it's complicated.
That's a complicated one, and there's also the acknowledgement as well, right, that it's a fictional fantasy world. However, art imitates life and vice versa. And there are going to be some parallels that you don't always see right away. And also, to go back to another comment that you made in that statement, sometimes you can be too close. Sometimes you can be too close to an issue. So there are certain topics that I get very, very passionate about, that I am very familiar with, that I would not trust my own objectivity to review, because I acknowledge that within myself. I know that there are certain things when it comes, think about the whole list of different things that pop up in a safety tools checklist, right? There are some things that as a sensitivity reader, I would have to X card and say, look, I appreciate that you are giving this theme the level of care that it needs, that it deserves, but I am probably not the best person to do that. I will say I have not been asked to do anything like that. I have not had that experience as of yet.
But you know where your limits are as a human being.
I know where my boundaries are. And I've got to be honest about that for both my own purposes, but then as a professional editor as well. Ooh, yes, Greyfork, yes.
Yes.
Has there been any sensitivity reading you've done which has greatly changed the direction the game/system, etc. was going? Yes. I'm not going to give details on it. But because this is a self-imposed NDA for a project that I'm helping with at some point in the future, we'll say it's within the Tattered Bear umbrella, right? So, oh yeah, if you didn't know, I am also the lead editor and production manager and client outreach person for Tattered Bear. And so one of the services we do provide is consultation and production, which will include things like general sensitivity reading review. So I will say that sometimes you look at a game. Let's say that game talks about, I'll put it this way, mental health, right? And there are certain mechanics within that game that are very specifically associated with different types of maladaptive behaviors for mental health. Let's say someone wants to take that game and make it better, right? Have some of the mechanics in that game and switch things around a little bit. I know I'm speaking in generalizations. All of that to say, if the themes in question are intrinsically tied to the mechanics, yes, there are absolutely going to be times where that is going to have to change. So we can come up with a couple of different examples here, right? One that we talked about off stream when we were preparing for this is Call of Cthulhu and the insanity kind of mechanic. For that one, it's gotten a lot of backlash over the years, and it's also gotten a lot of praise. That is a very sensitive topic because that is an example of you have an insanity mechanic, but the way it's treated within the theme and through the mechanics of the game still kind of fit the theme. On the other hand, you have a game like Everyone is John. I'm not even going to talk about the big names. Everyone is John. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with this one, but it's a smaller game. It's very interesting. But all of the players are representing a voice in a quote-unquote mentally insane man's head. And you're trying to control the actions of this person. That is not okay. For many different reasons. But that is one where if someone were to have asked, if I were somehow to have been brought on as a sensitivity editor from a mental health perspective to review a game like that with that kind of system, I would say, okay, let's backtrack a little bit, because there are different things in there where you're looking at removal of autonomy, you're looking at a misrepresentation and a harmful representation of multiple personality disorder, disassociation, bipolar disorder, paranoia, all of those different things wrapped up in one generically titled insane person, and that can be quite harmful. So if you look at something, and I'll keep using the mental health route, if you look at something and you're using mental health or whatever the theme is, economic disparity, if you're making a joke of it, if it becomes the butt of a joke instead of something that could be interesting within your game, within your story, then it's probably going to have to change. And it's probably going to have to take the mechanics in a different direction. Oh, look who it is. What's up, Cyrus? How's it going?
Did you ever play the Stanley Parable script?
I didn't, but I got it on a Steam deal, and I haven't played it yet. And I was going to be playing it blind. Let's talk about it.
I have a very odd experience with Stanley Parable because I was unfortunately very ill while watching my partner play it and was dosed up on lots of painkillers. So it's probably not the best experience, but from what I understand, deals with similar themes in a much more sensitive way while still being lighthearted about it. Which is a very difficult line to walk. Because there are always going to be people on either side of things that are going to get hurt when you try and walk that line.
Yeah.
And I think that a slightly easier example would be Barbie.
Let's talk about Barbie.
Yeah. Because
as a case study, so we're going to use the Barbie movie, one, because we both watched it and it was amazing and it was so many layers. But we can use this as an example and a little bit of a case study for some of the different things that we've talked about in our stream so far, because that is also completely unrelated to TTRPGs, right? So let's take something that is still applicable to this field, but a different medium. Yeah, Barbie, go for it.
It is a film designed to make people not comfortable with gender norms being broken, uncomfortable with gender norms being broken.
Yes, because they shouldn't be comfortable.
But it's still
that's Scrubby Advocate
film.
Coming out, not the editor.
Yeah. But it is still a kids' film. It's
PG-13.
It's rated 12. It's rated 12A over here. So in theory, a younger than a 12-year-old can watch it if they've got an adult with them. So it's bordering that line.
Yeah.
But it's a film about Barbie, and they have somehow managed to completely reverse gender norms, hit feminism into intersectionality.
Yep.
Like as we said earlier, the white savior Barbie comment was
it broke me. A lot of things in that movie broke me, but I had to do a mental double take. Like, did they say that? Yes, they did.
And there was a whole, I don't want to call it a rant because it really doesn't do justice to the dialogue itself. No. Because it is an extremely well-written, well-filmed, well-directed movie. We'll
try not to give spoilers for those of you in the audience.
But there is a very well-scripted rant about the ideals that are expected of women in the real world. And how difficult it is to deal with and stand up to those expectations. And I mean, this is something I know I've openly spoken on stream about. I don't fit in those gender norms. I use they, them pronouns. I am someone who has spent the vast majority of my life questioning what it is to be female. And even outside of that gender normality, it made me think about things my brain is still struggling to get its head around, but not in a negative way.
Right.
It handles everything so well from every different aspect it can, as sensitively as it can do, while still making it an extremely fun and light-hearted film. But it is not shy in the message it's trying to tell at all.
Not at all.
That is gender norms suck.
And this
from
is
the
a
first
great
30 seconds
from
of
the first
film.
30 seconds. And from the standpoint of so previously we were talking about there's a line as a sensitivity editor between doing your editing and then using it as a platform for social activism. This is a situation where because the output and the project itself was meant to lean heavily into advocacy and social activism, do it. But I can only imagine how many different perspectives, how many different voices from what you could call a sensitivity editing standpoint would have been involved in the making of that movie. So when you talk about a team, they sure as hell did have a team. Yeah. You can see it. You can, without even Googling it, you can see it and how it was represented, because you had all of the different aspects of femininity of the range of experiences within that realm, but also breaking down gender binary as well in a very interesting way. And I'm also someone who has struggled to navigate the traditional gender binary over the years in many ways. And I'm just now in my 30s coming to terms with it and figuring out what is comfortable and how I myself identify. I am largely femme presenting, she, they, but it's still, it's a minefield. It's a minefield of things.
Yeah, it is.
And it's interesting because it looks at it not just from the femme perspective, but also the masculine perspective as well. And it's not just a man-hating feminist movie. It isn't. Because the storyline for the Kens, and I won't go into it because spoilers, the storyline for the Kens is also
as important.
very, very important.
Yeah.
And a conversation that I would say is even harder to have. It's even more difficult because it confronts some of those deeply rooted vulnerabilities and cultural norms and expectations. It forces the audience, regardless of the perspective and background that you have, it forces the audience to confront some of those internalized biases that we have, that we've talked about earlier in this stream. And it does it in such a sensitive but still strong and direct way. So another thing about sensitivity reading, if you're trying to convey a certain type of message, right, like Barbie does, you don't always need to hide behind metaphor. Again, we want to ensure that themes are portrayed faithfully and sincerely, not necessarily to soften a blow, right? If you have a specific kind of message that you want to present, you're not censoring. Sensitivity editing is not censorship. And all of the sensitivity review that would have gone into the Barbie movie sure as hell didn't censor anything. And I think it's a fantastic example of how it can be very effective and how it can be a very powerful tool, even a weapon, to wield.
And I think it's something we were saying when we were talking about how, like, preparing for this stream was sometimes hiding behind those metaphors or hiding those messages, not necessarily hiding behind, but hiding those messages within metaphors can often do as much damage as misrepresenting them as well. Sometimes you need to be slapped in the face with the point, or people are going to keep it, oh, it's open to interpretation, we don't know what they were actually saying. Sometimes you need to go, no, this very much is the point of this film. Right. The entire point of this film is to break down gender norms of the last 50 years. And that's what that's what Barbie did perfectly. Right. It knew its audience was very much not kids as much as it was a kids film. It's like watching SpongeBob as a grown. Yeah. It's like watching SpongeBob as a grown up and realizing just how much of that was aimed at the parents as it was the kids. Yeah. It's knowing who your audience are going to be, and no matter who you were walking out of that cinema, no matter what age you were walking out of that cinema, it made you think about something.
It did. It absolutely did. And yes, if you haven't seen it yet, highly, highly encourage it. Even if you don't care about Barbie, right? I had a very complicated relationship with Barbie dolls growing up. Me too. Because on one hand, I kept getting gifted them, but I liked them. But at some point, you're told, regardless of your gender, right?
You're too old.
You're told that either you're too old for it or anything that's pretty and feminine is weak and it's lesser. So I know for me, I'll talk about my personal experiences with it, right? One, when I was growing up, Barbies didn't look like me, but, you know, I could kind of ignore that because the way that young girls would play with Barbies was more that you were projecting yourself into whatever the toy was you're playing with, whether it was a Barbie or a dinosaur or whatever. I had Barbies, dinosaurs, and race cars when I was a kid. Huh?
So no wonder we all got hooked on tabletop
No
role-playing
wonder.
games.
No wonder, because we like to work through the different characters. So many things. But so you project yourself into the toy, right? But then at some point, you are told that that's not appropriate. And there was even a backlash in the early days of this toy being developed, that it looked like a fully grown adult woman, and not a baby doll, because, you know, we can't have people thinking about their futures. That was cynical of me. I can't do that. Nope. Anyway, it goes into it in the movie. It's a wonderful movie.
Very early on in the movie.
Very early on in the movie. It talks about different styles of play, and it forces you again to confront some of those preconceived notions. And people will misinterpret it as well. So, again, an example.
They will go in bad faith.
They will go in bad faith. And to some degree, when it comes to TTRPGs as well, you can't avoid that. Right? Even if you do everything right when it comes to sensitivity editing and reading, at some point, just because I would say that the Barbie movie did a pretty damn good job, but there are still going to be people who will go in with bad faith, depending on the types of themes, especially, right? Because unfortunately, we do still have a lot of conflict and segmentation within our societies. We are in a time of social change, and this is another thing to acknowledge as sensitivity readers. We are in a time of prolonged social change. Anytime there is change of any sort, in either direction, there's going to be backlash, because it changes status quo and it challenges previously held perspectives. So there's going to be someone who will say, I fundamentally disagree. I'm not even going to read into it and entertain the thought. I just know I disagree and I don't like it. We're gonna have to accept that. Right? Because that's the world we live in. And to be honest, if you're trying to communicate a message, whatever it is, if it doesn't, what was that quote? If it doesn't piss someone off, you're not doing it right.
Yeah.
Don't be adversarial. Don't be combative with it outside of what your message is and what would be effective, right?
The other thing is, if you're coming up against people like that in your work, you're probably not aiming your work towards the right target audience.
Yep.
It's gonna go outside of your circle. It's always going to find an audience that you don't expect it to. But if you're coming up against people that are so vehemently against what you're creating, you're aiming it at the wrong people.
Right. And that's okay though. If they don't like what you're creating, what you have to say, they're not your audience. They're not your audience. So focus on who your audience actually is and who the intended audience is. So I'll talk about Bard RPG, for example, because I can talk about that all day long, and I can shit talk, I can go into the deep dives, all good. But Bard RPG is not for everyone. It's all ages, it's genre agnostic. But if you're looking for a game where you have the crunchy mechanics, and you have combat, and you have those different types of things, which in other systems I do enjoy, Bard RPG is not for you, because it's not there. And there have been cases where someone will go, well, that sounds kind of boring. And I'll say, okay, well, it's not for you then. Go play something else. Not everyone has to like the product that you put out there. And that's okay.
I feel like it's kind of jumping back to a previous question, but now you've said we can talk about Bard RPG.
Yeah, we can do it. I mean, it's on the overlay after all.
Yeah.
Just go watch Barbie movie, guys. Do it.
Yeah,
and then tweet or Skeet.
Do it.
Let us know what you think, because I'm dying to have more people to talk about it with.
But going back to I can't remember who it was in chat. I think it's Grateful that asked about making not kid-friendly lore kid-friendly.
Yes.
It was something we had a big discussion about in Bard RPG of whether we can make horror family-friendly.
Yeah, because it's genre agnostic, and you can use that system for any type of setting, any setting you want. So we had to put some heavy disclaimers in there.
And you can combat your sensitivity issues with content warnings, with disclaimers. Your job isn't necessarily to remove that content. It's about making it safe for people to make their own judgment, and as safe an environment for the players as possible. Part of what I do in my general sensitivity reading is working on safety tools and consent questionnaires. Things like that can help. Vampire the Masquerade and the new Hunter book has, and World of Darkness has been notorious for dealing with some very, very, very deep, dark topics and not handling them particularly well. And they have done an awful lot in the last kind of generation of games to do what they can to make it better. And there is a fantastic content warning in Hunter, the new Hunter game, that is wonderful and goes, yes, these topics are here. Yes, they've not been covered particularly well in the past, but these topics are still going to be spoken about. But here are some safety tools, and here are some suggested safety tools and ways of dealing with those topics sensitively. You don't have to stop talking about things. We don't want to hide these things behind a mirage of they don't really happen, because they do.
Yeah.
Is it necessary within the game and the story you're trying to tell? Then okay, we will find a way to make it as safe and accessible as possible. If it's not necessary, then from a game design perspective and a lore perspective, why the hell do that?
You wouldn't want it anyway. If it distracts, if you're adding something purely for the shock value, then you probably don't need it, right? And we don't typically like that in movies either. Like, it's got to fit the theme and the main story and the main design goals of it. There are absolutely ways to make things like horror accessible for all ages. Kids enjoy a good, spooky story once in a while. Scooby-Doo is a great example of it. So there's horror as a genre, and then there are different subgenres, just like there are different subcultures in a larger society. So think about, and this is a bit of a design recommendation, right? But also going into the sensitivity rating kind of thing. This is what I would say in any consultation. So here you go. Have it for free. When you're creating for any sort of genre, we'll talk about horror. What are the elements that you want to maintain? What is it that you like about the genre? Do you like the suspense? Do you like the sometimes supernatural aspect of it? Do you like the intensity? Do you like the jump scares? Do you like the twists and the unexpected reveals? These are all things that can help to build tension. And a lot of times what we like about horror, it's the tension. If you can find good ways to build that tension, you don't necessarily have to go into truly horrific things, right? Horror doesn't always have to be body horror. But then again, there are different levels of that. Do you want zombies? Or do you want mutilation? Some of those things are going to be a little bit more all-ages friendly than others. But you can still have that horror genre. And you can still have that feeling, that emotion. Because good storytelling evokes emotions, right? It makes you think about things. It makes you feel things. And that's what we want in TTRPGs. If you're playing through a campaign and you're not feeling some emotions, are you really playing?
Yeah. It's like Chris has just said, kids love emotional expression, and horror is a place to horror is a place to explore fear safely.
Can we use that as a line? That's a beautiful way of saying it. A place to explore fear safely, because fear is a human emotion. It's very, very cathartic in a safe environment, and how to confront fears in a safe environment. That is a beautiful way of saying it. Yeah. I love it, Hops.
Hold my hands up. I don't do horror. I'm not I love horror, but I just do tiny little doses.
Got a love-hate relationship with it. I've talked about that on this stream before. You will not catch me playing a horror video game on stream.
Like things like there are certain games and stuff that I can get away with playing. Phasmophobia, I love it. Even on the VR, it's fun. But Alien in VR, no, never gonna happen. But if I put a horror film on, it's the middle of the day, all the curtains have to be open.
Yes.
It can't be dark by the time the film finishes. Like, my brain goes overboard. And I cannot deal with a huge amount of horror, but I like my ghosty films, things like Insidious, and Women in Black, stuff like that. I really like it because there's very little actually going on. It's more atmospheric, and I can deal with atmospheric horror. You throw something else at me, anything with spiders in it, no. Clowns, not a huge fan of. Hostel, like the gore, they're just no. But, and that's the thing that I will draw myself back from a sensitivity point of view. I don't know how to deal with that sensitively. I don't consume that media. I have no experience in that field. I have no primary, secondary, tertiary. I have no experience in that field
y'all,
at all.
Hire Riley for everything, but maybe not horror.
Yeah.
That is not a hat.
It's the one hat I know I can't wear because I know my limits as a sensitivity reader.
Yeah.
And I struggle with spiders in any context. even just in D&D, there doesn't have, it can be completely theater of the mind, no sound effects, no music. If it's mentioned that spiders or driders are near, then I will end up having a panic attack in the corner. Not good. I know I can't deal with that.
And those are things you've got to acknowledge and for people to be respectful of as well. And as a sensitivity reader, you might come across a lot of different themes that make you very uncomfortable. Also protect yourself, okay? Yes. Be kind to yourself because you are also a consumer of the product. It is also having an effect on you. When it comes to horror, I have a very, do not, never break your own boundaries. Because it's nothing good comes of it when it comes to this kind of context. When it comes to horror, for me, I've got a love-hate relationship with it. I enjoy the feeling of kind of being scared, but then if there's a come down, right? It's like riding roller coasters. Yeah. Oh my god, we're up so high. Oh my god, we're gonna die. No, we're good. I like the roller coaster feeling emotionally. I like when you have that rise and the fall and the tension. I don't like certain types of horror, right? So I'm okay with zombies, I'm okay with monsters, I'm okay with aliens and that kind of supernatural stuff. I have a hard time with psychological thriller kind of horror when it's other humans doing bad things to humans. I sometimes have a hard time with the spirit and possession kind of horror. I'll watch it. I won't be able to look away. But I won't sleep for a week because I have an overactive imagination as a result of some of my neurospiciness, and it will just, I can't get away from it. It will never leave.
That's where I end up on films like Hostel and the first few Saw films where there was actually a storyline and it wasn't just gore for the sake of gore. I love it because it is as much psychological horror as much as there is the body gore side of things. It is psychological horror.
Yeah.
But the second that film's done, I'm gonna be a paranoid mess for the next week and a half.
I can appreciate it from a psychological point of view and how it can dig into okay, The Ring. I still cannot have a TV in my bedroom. I can't. I never will. Never, ever again. If I'm in a hotel and there's a TV, that's fine. It stays off. I don't even turn it on. It's just not a thing. So, saw some good comments and I'd like to talk about here. Because this also is part of the overarching theme of sensitivity reading. Session 0.
Yes. Before we get on to Session 0, because it is a very important one.
Yeah.
Can we take a quick 2-minute break?
Yes.
I need to use the loo.
Take a quick 2-minute break. That's all right. I'll hang out. I'll chat.
I will leave you with stream, and I will be back.
Take your time. Comfort breaks are important. If anyone else needs a break, take a couple minutes. So I see what you're saying in there, Hobbs. We won't get too much into it because I want to wait for Riley to come back. Found out in our multiverse game that one of our players has a thing about puppets when we did a Muppets episode. You've got to have session zeros, and sometimes there are things that you miss, right, with safety tools. I know we'll talk about it again, but things are always going to pop up in the middle of the game, in the middle of the story. You've got to be prepared for that. So while we are waiting for Riley, I will continue to ramble But if you've got any other questions, keeping in mind we will get back to session 0 when Riley returns. When Riley returns. I like the ring of that. Put up some more questions. Share some more ideas. Oh my goodness, mother-in-law has a thing about mascot outfits. Finds them creepy as hell. Yeah, let's talk about things that creep us out. China dolls. Old black and white or sepia toned photos of like family photos or of like children. Nope. Can't do it. Can't do it. Taxidermy. I don't like taxidermy. Walking on glass? Not a fan. Not a fan. So even if I go to see like a performance, an entertainment type of thing, a circus act, if there's like people walking on glass, I can't look at it. I can't watch it. Nope. Especially if it's barefoot. Nope. Oh, those porcelain dolls? Creepy. Creepy. Hop says, as you might expect from a ranch in Texas, this house came with a lot of taxidermy. No! That's not something I necessarily expect. Really? Now I've got to know, what kind? Huh. I didn't think I was bothered by it till I had to get it all out of it. No, I can't do it. I can't do it. And I get it. If you go to any natural history museum or wildlife kind of museum, you're gonna see some taxidermy. It's just weird to me. It's super weird. Also, scrolling back a little bit in the chat, I saw someone say that he saw a comment about the Barbie movie being like an example of a TTRPG. That's pretty funny. Welcome back!
I have returned.
Riley
Hello.
has returned. Spiders are definitely a big no-no. Absolutely. So we're talking a little bit about things that creep us out. I mentioned taxidermy. And Hops has some examples of taxidermy. No.
I don't have an issue.
He did his
with
own taxidermy.
I have no issue with taxidermy. I have issue with this one particular fox taxidermy that sits in the just right as you come through the front door to Colchester Natural History Museum. And it is a very, very, very old taxidermy fox. And not particularly well done.
I thought that was my phone for a second.
No, that was my phone. And yeah, it
That's not
has
good.
traumatized me since I was a small child. Since I was a small child, and it's the only taxidermy thing that freaks me out. But it's just that. No.
Not a fan. Nope.
No,
Nope.
but
I'm
spiders
gonna say no
are
there.
a big one for me. Like, other bugs I don't particularly like, but I can deal with them.
Yeah.
Snakes, fine with. Scorpions, no issue with at all. In fact, I've had pet snakes. They make really good pets.
Snakes are cool. Snakes get a bad rap. They do. I actually like
spiders.
Snakes.
It's taken me 30 odd years, and or nearly 30 years, and I can finally watch the Shelob scenes in Lord of the Rings.
To be fair, those are intense.
They are.
Right?
But
I'm
I've also
okay with
been watching
spiders.
that film
That's still scary.
repeatedly. But because I've been watching that film repeatedly since I was a small child, I've kind of got myself to a point where I can. Same with spiders in the
Facing the
Hobbit.
fears. Yeah.
But I don't even like a spider when it's in my bathtub. Like,
No one wants a
no,
spider in the bathtub.
Like, no.
So let's talk about session 0. And I think this is probably going to be the last big topic we have time for tonight. But this is something that's very important. So, as a sensitivity editor, one of the things that we do consult on quite a lot are safety tools in session 0. Especially if you have a game that includes themes or can include themes that are going to be a little bit challenging. So any sensitivity reader should be able to say, hey, you have these themes, you hired me on for these themes, you should also think about sensitivity tools. That should be a common item in our toolbox, if you will, as professionals in this industry. So would you like to go and kind of give us like an intro thing for safety tools? Because that's one thing that I specifically asked for your help on with Bard RPG.
So, safety tools are a system, whether that's a system specifically built for your game, like with the Hatchlings Inspiral stuff, they have the Grail card, which is a built-in game mechanic safety tool. Or you use a safety tool like the Lines and Veils, which we will go into, the X card, things like that. They are, or just the traffic light system. They are a way for players to be able to communicate without any vocalization necessary that I can't do this, the scene needs to change, or it needs to be pulled back from for a moment so I can recuperate, and no explanation needs to be given.
Yeah. And that's a key part of it as well, because you do your surveys, you have your conversations during session 0. That's good. You want to always make room for that, whether it's on the individual level or as a group. A lot of times people will feel more comfortable saying things one-on-one, but as the GM or whoever is facilitating the game, you should always be mindful of these. And when it comes to having the X cards and the Lines and Veils, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but things very, very often will come up in the middle of gameplay. You can get ahead of certain topics, and you can talk about some of the themes that may be present in the game. So for Bard RPG, it could be any genre. If you want to run a game that's a little bit scarier, if you want to go into horror, if you want to go into ghost stories or whatever it may be, talk about that. And in the context of that game, think about and offer to your characters, what are some of the lines and veils with these themes specifically, both in general, but then specific to zombies, right? So over on Rule of Lore, I was and am a player and character in their Tomorrow is Dead series. It's fantastic. Go follow Rule of Lore as well. Here's a pitch for it. But if you saw season 1, we were using the Kids on Bikes system for it. And we talked about, in session 0, different zombie kind of story specific lines and veils. So you want to go into that. But then, as you progress through a story, you're not going to catch everything. You might have something like a Muppet episode that you guys mentioned in chat that you just don't really foresee. And you need to have mechanics in place that remove the barriers that help people overcome any anxiety or discomfort they may feel with identifying something right there in that minute. It could be an X card, it can be a break of some sort, it could be a pause, it could even be, if it gets very, very uncomfortable, it could even be a case where the character needs to go somewhere else for a while. You need to go, back to the clubhouse, back to a safe place that you have in your game, back to the headquarters, whatever it may be. They need to go home for a little bit. They're called away. As long as you have those things, as long as you're able to discuss them and you make provisions for them, and if you can bake them into your game, and as sensitivity readers, you can help to advise on a good way to do that, and it's so beneficial.
Fun as well.
It's very fun.
For us, it makes it. We don't get to do the whole traditional being creative thing very often as sensitivity readers. I like to see my editing as helping other people be creative, but when it comes to actually helping build safety tools, it lets us really be creative, trying to make something that can fit perfectly for your game, rather than just adapting something that has been put together as a generic catch-all, like the X card, lines and veils and stuff like that. Like, yes, they will work in any given situation. These tools will work. But if we make something specifically for your game that's going to work within the themes and everything of your game, then that lets us be creative as well. And it makes it, I found players generally seem more comfortable using something that's within the game itself and not something that's added as a, by the way, we're using this safety tool.
Yeah. It helps to maintain the immersion. And allows you to enact different safety mechanisms in your game without breaking the narrative, without having it be an abrupt, kind of jarring, sometimes emotionally jarring, depending on the moment, stop, which will serve the purpose of making the person who called for the safety mechanism feel more uncomfortable and self-conscious much of the time. It'll draw more attention to it, and it can create an uncomfortable situation for the other players as well. So you want to be respectful of everyone involved, especially the person who's feeling uncomfortable, but you want to ensure that it's done in a very smooth way. So I hope you found that helpful. I hope you found that beneficial. I think we're going to go into the wrap-up stage of our stream, unless you've got any parting shots, Riley, before we get into some announcements.
The only other thing I would kind of add to that would be always check in with your players. If a safety tool is used, you never expect a player to go into detail, but even if it's just if you're playing online, a quick message at the end of the session just going, hope you're okay, sorry things got a little bit intense there, we'll bear that in mind for next session and going forward. Is there anything you want to talk about, and offer that out to your players, and if you don't, then hopefully they trust you enough as your DM to, like, I know there are certain, there my best friend DMs for me. He knows damn well that I will go to him if I need to say anything. He knows he doesn't need to message me. And so if you have that relationship that's between you and, but it's as standard rule,
it's so good to check in.
As in a standard game, check in. And even if safety tools haven't been used, check in occasionally anyway, just to make sure everyone is happy with how things are going.
Some games will have that baked into the system as well. So I will do another shameless plug, I guess, because we've talked about Bard RPG a few times. Within Bard RPG, there is a specific reflection phase, and there is a section in there about checking in with your players, and even offering some guiding questions and examples of when it might be appropriate to do so. At the end of every session, you have your reflection phase. It's when you're thinking back to all the story threads of the plot points you've discovered, you're thinking about your bonds, you're thinking about your wishes, your goals, you're leveling up, and it's an opportunity to sit around the campfire and talk about, okay, this intense thing happened. How do you feel? How do your players feel? Sometimes people might have an easier time of expressing complex emotions through the avatar of a character. Kids especially, young players especially. So these are very good things
have fun doing fun
with
stuff,
Bard
Chris.
things. Trademarked. Thanks for stopping by, Hops. Always good to have you. I do love the reflection phase. But some games will have those baked in as well. Yeah,
and I'm seeing it being built into games more often as well, as the sensitivity reader craze, or however you want to phrase it, how us becoming more widely accepted within the community is becoming, as we are as a profession are becoming more widely known. It is stuff that's being brought into games.
There's a dog under my desk. Yes,
it is things being brought into games more often, and every single project I've worked on and I'm currently working on has had some kind of reflection phase built into it, and that's over the last 2 years.
I think that is indicative of how we are evolving and maturing as a community and as a society, because I think as information is more and more rapidly accessible, as people are exposed to different schools of thought, different cultures, different backgrounds, different experiences, we are collectively acknowledging, and you see this in different ways with the media that's produced and the fact that there are reflection phases and safety tools that are by default included now, which is perfect. This shows that we are starting to develop more collective empathy an understanding of social contexts, of each other, of ourselves. And honestly, I think that's a beautiful thing. You're right, a few years ago, the phrase, the title of a sensitivity reader or editor didn't really mean much. It didn't really exist outside of the past, the recent years, we'll say. I'm not going to put a number to it. But I think the fact that we're even having this conversation and there is discourse surrounding this topic and the topics that would require this kind of service, this kind of attention, is a very positive thing. Yes, there are people who are going to critique. Yes, there are people who are going to get upset. That's okay. That's human nature. We like to get upset and passionate about a lot of things in a lot of different ways.
And it's why a lot of us do what we do, from all creators, not just sensitivity readers. Creators generally want creating the change they want to see.
Yes.
And we just help them do that a little bit less offensively at times.
Effectively. Let's say they do it more effectively.
More effectively.
Let's do the positive. Yeah, so that's our take on sensitivity reading. Hopefully it's been informative, interesting, entertaining.
We could do a whole series on this.
We could do a whole series on it.
And break it down
we will
bit
continue
by
to
bit.
do so. Yeah. So there are a couple of things that I think we're going to announce. The first one...
I don't have the final image
That's
yet.
okay. We'll save that for the big reveal at the end. The first one is I'm coming back for more continuous and regular creative streaming. I've taken breaks here and there because life, and the more we hang out on stream, the more I'll be able to reveal some of that to you guys as well. Life be crazy sometimes, but it's okay. You will see a continuation of the game design series with Rich for Cryptid Creeks, but you're also going to see a return to my own creative content around Bard RPG and the different worlds. So another series that's coming back is the game design and writing series for my own stuff. And the first world that we're going to dive into, and Riley is going to be part of it. You're going to see a lot more of Riley on these streams. I don't know if y'all caught the still as of yet unfinished because life gets in the way.
Last episode yet.
Outpost 5. So Outpost 5 was the first fully dedicated to Bard RPG actual play campaign that we started. It was meant to be a short shot interim in between Heroes of Iastera episodes, but I miss it. I miss the world. I miss the characters. One day we will finally have that finale, even if it's a couple years late. Just like we'll finally get back to Iastera if it's a couple years late. It's fine. But we're at least going to get back into some world building, some game design, because I miss it and I want to keep creating things. So we are going to dive back into Outpost 5 in a galaxy far, far beyond. And
I'm so looking forward to
I'm
this.
so looking forward to it. So we're going to do some world building, we're going to do some game design, we're going to do storytelling, we're going
and
to...
some really interesting deep dives on cultural psychology.
Cultural psychology. So I want this to be the first setting in our series of Bard RPG game settings and different things that maybe you'll see one day in the future, but for now it's just going to be for funsies. I really wanted to lean into the sci-fi western genre because I wanted to branch away from my past looking almost exclusively at fantasy, and I wanted to lean into a different genre, one that I love, that's near and dear to my heart. Think Firefly, think The Expanse, think Next Generation, all of that goodness. So we're gonna go into that. We're going to look at cultural psychology, going to look at the way human nature evolves post-Earth, going to look at the role of things like identity, things like religion, faith, and mythology. Yes. Absolutely. So we're going to have a lot of that influence. I don't want to give any spoilers, but watch
be
this
lots of fun.
space, both whether you're watching from YouTube or you're watching from Twitch, live streaming on both platforms, and the VOD will be available. So keep an eye out for that. That's probably going to start up within the next couple of weeks. I gotta do a little bit of programming deconfliction. Probably going to keep it to Thursday streams right now. Because I am a cultural psychologist professionally, that does require me to travel for work sometimes. So there will be weeks where I'm on the road and I won't be able to stream because I don't have my travel rig anymore. It's busted. Rest in pieces. But we are going to get back to this more regularly. I'm not going to promise a weekly stream. Under promise, over deliver. That's what I'll say. And break from that topic. There's another project that I know Riley is just, you're wiggling in your chair getting ready for it.
I'm excited.
So
I'm just annoyed we don't have
that's okay. That's okay. We'll skeet tweet it out. We'll post it. We'll share it afterwards. We are launching a new project. It's not TTRPGs. It's not. But it is very closely related.
We do expand.
We do expand because we are very passionate people with a lot of interests. So in the same vein of the conversations that we've had here, talking about sensitivity, talking about accessibility as well, we are very, very excited to announce a brand new project called Looking Glass Archives. Riley, tell the good people what this is, what this project is.
This is going to be a kind of twofold, potentially threefold, depending on how much time and
Let's start slow.
Definitely twofold. Way at making books more accessible for people who are deafened and hard of hearing. So this is going to take place both over stream, where we will be reading chapters from a particular book, maybe a couple of chapters at a time. Can I do the big starting reveal?
Yes, you can do the starting reveal.
Starting with the Alice in Wonderland books. So we will be going through the Alice in Wonderland books chapter by chapter. So that'll be Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. The audio will be released in podcast format, and then there will be the Twitch and YouTube streams, which will be fully captioned as all of Scriv's streams are, but also with a focus of making things lip readable, because Scriv is a very easy person to lip read, as you could tell when they forget to unmute themselves.
Oh yeah. That happens sometimes.
But we both have issues, myself especially. I really struggle holding books, and I have the luxury and privilege of being able to turn on an audiobook instead. Not everyone has that luxury and that privilege in order to do so. So we're going to be going through a lot of the public domain books.
Yep.
And focusing on banned books and books that have been banned at some point. Because the second aspect to the whole thing is at the end of each book, we are going to be doing a book club session.
Yes.
Or two, depending on how deep we need to go. Because
I'm so excited. We might not even wait until the end of the book.
Yeah.
We might do something every few chapters,
Yeah.
or if it's a particularly interesting chapter that we want to break down. It's a very, very exciting project with accessibility at the forefront.
And given the age of the books we're starting with, there are many, even those that are still very relevant in today's culture, like Alice in Wonderland. There are many problems and problematic themes within the books themselves and the authors. So we want to be able to break this down, and as well as the reasons they were banned in the first place, especially when it comes to the banned books list. So yes, this is going to be so much fun. My mother is designing our logo, and I was hoping she would have sent the final image through, but she
All
hasn't.
things in time.
So
This will make it an even more exciting
Yeah.
reveal when the time comes.
so at some point in the next few days, we will have that final logo image.
Yes.
And we can do a proper reveal on the X, and I don't even know how to reference it anymore.
On socials.
On
We'll
socials
do a
in
proper
general.
reveal. We are on Blue
And-
Sky.
Yeah.
Join us in the blue skies.
And the Looking Glass Archive has a Twitter that we will do the reveal with, and we will be doing the stuffs, and it's all going to be donation based at the moment.
All donation
So
based. Yes.
if you want to give us some money for our nice hard work, you're more than welcome to.
If you would like to support the
Yes.
project, we do have a Ko-fi that will be going live
Yes,
very,
with-
very soon. So,
along with all the socials and everything
with
like
the
that.
socials.
So
here's
wait
what you
for
can
the
expect.
big social reveal.
Big reveals. But you guys get the first look, sneak peek, behind the scenes, hot takes, whatever. So, here's what you can expect. We are starting with Alice in Wonderland series. We will be going into a variety of other books as well. We'll have the audio versions. We'll let you know what application, what platform we end up using for that. I'm going to consult some very good friends in the podcasting biz that I've worked with before. Stories Podcast, go check them out as well. They're wonderful, beautiful people. To determine the best way of going about this. And we will have live streams with the books, as Riley mentioned. So again, that'll be here on Twitch and on YouTube. We're going to record the VODs. That is going to be, I'm really excited about this, and I'm getting really nerdy about it. So because audiobooks were already created with the intent to make books and stories more accessible, when it comes to also having the lip reading aspect and having the captions, and even being used as a tool, so whenever you want to learn a different language, even being used as a tool for ESL, for example, we want to make this as widely applicable and useful for people as possible. Eventually, if very kind people wish to support the project and enable us to potentially hire more support on for Looking Glass Archives, we could even have someone signing alongside some of the chapters. So this is hopefully going to be one of the most accessible and sensitive presentations of books and audio books possible.
That's what we're aiming.
That's what we're
for
aiming
anyway.
for. We're gonna try to keep the scope manageable and reasonable. You know, if you try to do too much at once, it becomes distracting. But we'll probably have an official launch stream where we properly introduce Looking Glass Archives. I'll have a different layout and everything here. We'll show the branding and the logos and the artwork. But we'll also do an intro to our first book. We'll talk about the first book, talk about why we chose it, and then we'll be able to start releasing chapter by chapter.
I'm
more to
so
come.
excited.
Yeah, I am thrilled. I've loved audiobooks since I was little, a little scribble, and some very, very kind people
I think
out there in the
mine was
community
the
have said that I
Fox
should
and
get
the
into
Hound.
VO and audiobooks. Apparently, I have a decent enough voice to listen to. So
first
hopefully it'll be
audiobook.
nice.
What was your first audiobook you owned?
The Hobbit.
Mine was Fox and Hound. It was Disney.
No, nice.
On cassette tape.
On cassette tape, yes. Yeah, the first I remember was because my mother and I, huge bookworms, and if we were going on road trips,
Same
driving
dudes.
across country to visit family, I used to get motion sick. I would love to bring books with me, but I had really, really bad car sickness. So audiobooks were a wonderful, wonderful way of still keeping up with our favorite stories and sharing them with other people. So wonderful memories of listening to audiobooks while I've been traveling. And I'm still in a job where I travel a lot now, so it's something very comforting. And I know that there is a significant number of people in our community, in our circles, who use audiobooks to help with anxiety, to help them relax and unwind and decompress and even find enough comfort to get to sleep at night if you struggle with insomnia. Hey, so we're very passionate about this project.
Hi.
Hey. Anyway, that's our big reveal. We've been itching to talk about it since the beginning of the stream, but we thought a stream about sensitivity reading and accessibility would be a nice segue into Looking Glass Archives. So more to come. Many, many bright things in the future.
More beans will be spilled.
More beans will be spilled. All of the beans. So, yeah, that's all I've got. And anything else you'd like to say before we say goodnight to the good people?
Other than where to find us all on social media.
Yeah.
Scriv, where can we find you on social media?
I am on Blue Sky and Zitter. I have an Instagram that I haven't touched in a long time. So I'm here and on Blue Sky and on Zitter. As Scriv the Bard in all places.
I was gonna say you need to tell us what the handle is.
Scriv the Bard on all places. The handle's on the thingy.
This is true. This is true.
Where can we find you, Riley?
I am also on the X app and the Blue Sky app as It'd Be Riley. I am on Instagram as Riley_vapes_. I don't really use it. It's
Nice.
there though. It's mostly vaping stuff rather than anything else because
Multifaceted, many interests.
many hats.
Many hats.
But yeah, so if you want to go, I mean, I've made like a dozen posts over there. It's really not much, but it's there. But yeah, Twitter and Blue Sky are the two big ones. And yeah, Looking Glass Archive. I'm excited.
More to come as we go through the Looking Glass. All right, everyone, we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up there. Thank you so much for coming to hang out, spending some of your day with us here once again.
Yeah, these people chose to hang out with us rather than play Baldur's Gate.
What?
Well, you know what? We
happy-
will release
I'm
you
so
now.
happy you're
Go
here,
play
guys.
Baldur's Gate and watch Barbie movie. Or do whatever it
Yes.
is you'd like to do with the rest of your evening. Thank you so much once again for the support, for the great conversation, for the shared
Awesome
stories.
questions.
Really good questions. I'm telling you, I love the Scribble fam. Y'all are the best.
Scribblers are the best.
Yes. Okay. Keep adventuring, keep scribbling, and we will see you again next time. Have a nice night, everyone. Bye.
Bye.